Thursday, the 12th of that September. And we've got on today's Totally Football Show, Duncan Alexander.
Hello, James.
Hi, Duncan. Adrian Clarke's with us as well. All right, Adrian.
Hello.
Nice to see you. And on the big screen, Rory Smith.
Hello.
Hi, Rory. Nice to see you.
A pleasure to see you too.
We haven't actually talked, I don't think, since the Euro final.
That would be correct, I think, yeah.
You been well?
I've been very well. I kind of took 6 weeks off football, really. I went and did the Olympics.
Oh, yeah.
And fell in love with just became like a table tennis ultra.
Yeah.
Live table tennis. It's what I'm all about now. I might bring it up in the course of the podcast, so that's something to look forward to.
Excellent. Excellent. You've also, no doubt, been continuing to churn out if it's not award-winning, it should be On Soccer with Rory Smith newsletter, which...
It's a very much not award-winning On Soccer with Rory Smith newsletter, but it's quite fun.
Yeah?
Yeah, for all concerned, I like to think.
All right. Very nice. We've got the Premier League back this weekend. Lots to look forward to. North London derby. Bournemouth-Chelsea. We'll be hearing about the blue-on-blue skirmishes. And the West London Giants a little bit later on. This is Liverpool Forest. There's so much stuff. And, of course, there's been the remaining international games since our last show with that Nations League action. Tuesday, England beating Finland 2-0. Duncan.
Yes. I watched this.
Yep.
Because I had to. But it was good. Another 2-0 win. I mean, England are sort of marooned in League B, which means that it is a succession of fairly easy fixtures. But I think we saw, in a slightly different way to the Ireland game, which obviously quite het up, but this was another sort of sign of the differences under Lee Carsley.
What were they?
Well, he brought in Angel Gomez, who played for him in the under-21s, and yeah, he became, according to our friends at Opta, the first player on record to ever complete more than 100 passes on his England debut, and he brought a kind of chavvy, tiki-taka-esque sort of control to the middle of the park, which I think England have been, looking for, particularly in bigger games, for quite a long time. I mean, yes, big caveats, it's Finland, etc., but he did look, completely comfortable there. And yeah, even the fact he plays in League One and, no League player played for England since Trevor Steven back in the early 90s. So it's
amazing, huh?
He's, Manchester United fans are probably a bit sad that he was their player and has gone on to become this good because he looked very good.
Indeed, and he's been drawing rave reviews over in Liga as well. Rico Lewis making his second start for England at left back. Nono Madueke making his England debut, coming on late on to set up Kane's second game. Harry Kane with a brace in the match. That is now an absolutely crazy 68 goals in 100 appearances.
Yeah. I mean, again, that was probably the other story from the evening, was just how sharp Kane looked. I mean, his first goal hit it so hard, ridiculously hard. And it kind of makes you, slightly wistful for the summer in the sense that Kane in that level of fitness and freshness would have been a very different player. But yeah, people forget even a rubbish Kane in the Euro still won the Golden Boot or shared the Golden Boot.
Good Lord. I'm wistful for the summer. Pretend for a second, listener, that you care about how the group looks and feign surprise when I tell you that England are 2 wins out of 2, but only second in the group because Greece are top on goal difference because they've beaten Finland 3-0 and then the other night Ireland 2-0. So that's 2 defeats out of 2, consequentially for Heimer Hallgrimsson as Republic of Ireland manager. Since we're here, Rory, should we do a quick roundup of all the other salient international talking points? Rory's shaking his head.
No, I was going to say let's do it. It wasn't.
Oh, were you doing an Albanian assent?
I'm trying to respond to everything as an Albanian would.
Okay, then. Don't know what Albania did this in the Nations League. Duncan's on that. Well, I tell you that Wales secured their first win under Craig Bellamy Monday night. That was in Montenegro, not that far away. Already just 3 minutes in, they were 2-0 up. 2-1 the final score. France beat Belgium 2-0 in Lyon on Monday, with some actual goals from open play as well. Randall Colomwani and Ousmane Dembele responsible for those. Kevin De Bruyne, who you may recall at the Euros, in a bit of a huff when things didn't go his way. How did he take this? Not well. I quit. He's recorded telling the Belgian technical director.
Which is Albanian for I quit, I think.
Elsewhere, Italy, who beat France, you recall last time, 3-1, made it 2 wins out of 2 as they saw off Israel 2-1 in Budapest. David Fratesi with the opener off DeMarco's assist. That's now 6 goals for his country. since Spalletti took charge a year ago.
Do we think that Italy are kind of becoming the Sevilla of international football? So obviously, whenever there's a proper big tournament, they either aren't there or get knocked out really early. But they're going to be like a dominant force in the Nations League.
That's a bit rude. They won a Euros not long ago, Yuri, you know.
They did, but then they'd not been to a major tournament for quite a long time before that. Then they won the Euros and immediately didn't go to the next major tournament.
It is a bit confusing how their form oscillates wildly. Anyway, Netherlands and Germany enjoyed another thriller. There's now 25 goals they've had between them in their last 6 meetings.
All of which have happened in the last 3 months.
All of them. Is that right? Not quite entirely, but it feels that way.
They suddenly play each other all of the time.
2-2 draw anyway this time around. And Erling Haaland took his tally for Norway to 32 goals in 35 appearances. Have that, Harry Kane. Scoring the winner for the Norwegians at home to Austria, a game which saw the home side losing Man Odegaard to an ankle injury, a topic I feel we may return to in the course of today's show. Elsewhere, what did Albania do, Duncan?
They had a good away win against Ukraine.
Did they?
And then they followed that up with a defeat to Georgia.
Okay.
And Georgia are top of their League B standings with 2 out of 2. So.
All right. San Marino, meanwhile, was back to reality for them. They got beaten by Moldova in a friendly on Tuesday. In CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying, there was a rematch of the Copa America final, but Colombia beat Argentina this time 2-1. Brazil, meantime, went to Paraguay and lost for the 4th time in 5 qualifying matches. They've dropped back down to 5th. Keep thinking that they're going to sort that out, but playoff football is entirely possible on their road to the World Cup.
If this was any other World Cup qualification period, they'd be in trouble. But they're not, really, because I think almost every team from South America, barring the bottom 2.
They're only 1 point off a playoff spot.
Yeah, they'll salvage it, won't they? But it's a little bit embarrassing because look at the front guys. It's the Real Madrid front 3. Quite remarkable, really, that they're this bad.
But there is a good news story in South America, which is that Venezuela, I think, are level on points with Brazil. And Venezuela famously, for a given value of the word famously, have never been to a World Cup. And despite all the sort of political turmoil in Venezuela, they drew with Uruguay, I think, on Tuesday night or Tuesday morning. And they are now level with Brazil and in with a shout because, as Adrian says, of the expanded qualification process.
Aren't they the only country in South America where football isn't the main sport? And the main sport is?
Baseball.
Correct.
Knowledge.
Dropping knowledge bombs on you, listener. Hope you brought your hat.
There's always a quiz element to being around Duncan.
Yeah.
I mean, I've learned loads already. The whole Albanian shaking the head thing.
Did you not know that?
Venezuelan, sport.
If you're in Venezuela and an Albanian asks you what the national sport is, you're going to be shaking your head.
Do I nod or shake my head? I'm confused.
Okay, Premier League Match Day 4. Let's get that underway next. Premier League Match Day 4. Who remembers what happened last time out in our league? Well, Arsenal dropped 2 fat points and lost Declan Rice in that draw with Brighton. Everton against Bournemouth managed to lose a game that they were winning 2-0 in the 86th minute. Erling Haaland made it 6 goals in 2 games in Man City's 3-1 win at West Ham, and Man United lost 3-0 to Liverpool and possibly got off a bit lightly. This time around, United are down at Southampton in Saturday's early game. More grey jersey memories than a season of Bergerac. The 2 leaders go at it 3 p.m. Saturday. Liverpool hosting Forest. Man City facing Brentford, who were the last team to win against City at the Etihad 22 months ago, or 45 home games if you prefer. Elsewhere in the 3 o'clocks, you got Brighton Ipswich, Palace against loopholing Leicester, and a London derby as Fulham take on West Ham at 5:30 Saturday. It's dynamic pricing's Aston Villa. They're facing Everton. At 8 o'clock, Chelsea take time off from battling each other to take on Bournemouth instead. And then on Sunday, 2 games, the North London derby. And that's followed by possibly slightly anticlimactic Wolves-Newcastle. Let's begin with the game Gary Neville calls the best fixture in the Premier League. Spurs-Arsenal. Gary Neville calls it the best fixture in the Premier League. Certainly it's the goaliest, isn't that right, Duncan? The North London derby.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
The 2 games last season finished 2-2 and 3-2. Are we looking at another goal fest this time around?
Just on the goal subject, it's also the game to see the team who score first win least often. So there's a lot. It's very much a game where scoring early is not necessarily a good thing, and it turns around. And I think
Like
that
a penalty shootout.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Well, that makes it even more exciting, Duncan. Spurs coming into this one, having dropped points in a slightly shaky start to newly promoted Leicester, as well as that defeat to Newcastle. And Rory, how do you judge their start to the season?
Well, it's hard to judge it as being what they would have wanted. I suspect it is a subpar one, as you say, drawing with Leicester, losing quite an even game to Newcastle, and St James's Park is a tricky place to go. So that's not like a disastrous result. And then they hammered Everton, of course, which looked at the time like a really big kind of statement performance. Here we go. Subsequent context maybe makes that less impressive. They could do with a kind of statement performance. I think there's always a risk with Spurs, particularly with Postecoglou. Things got a little bit, what's the word, like not angry, but that you could feel rumblings towards the end of last season, and it feels to me like Postecoglou needs a good start to make those go away and remind everyone that he's, broadly speaking, a good thing for Tottenham and a good thing for the Premier League. So yeah, there's pressure on Spurs going into this game. All
right, wait till you hear which Arsenal legend is backing Spurs for this derby. Adrian.
I'm not backing Spurs for this derby.
Yeah, you are.
I'm not backing them.
You're backing them. I heard you say so on air.
One of my selections on a betting podcast was Spurs double chance. That could be the draw. It could be the draw. It could be a win. But it represented good value. Anyway, of course they can win this game. Yeah. Of course, this is a great opportunity for them. I would ordinarily expect Arsenal to go to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and win like they have done in the last two matches, but you can't underestimate the absence of Rice and Odegaard. I think that Arsenal haven't played a Premier League match without him in the squad since he joined.
Rice.
Rice. So, that's something new to get used to. He wasn't in great form, I have to say, ahead of the international break. He'd been very quiet, actually, by his usual standards. Wasn't dominating games. But you want him there. And Odegaard's a massive miss, with and without the ball. Obviously, no one created more chances than him in open play last season. He's a brilliant player with the Arsenal press. It's a big old loss. So Tottenham have a good opportunity here, I think, to pick up a positive result. But I think this is, in a way, quite exciting for Arsenal. Opportunity knocks for Arteta to show how flexible, how versatile, how innovative he can be as a coach. And I'm fascinated to see what he does with the team selection, because no one knows who he's going to pick. The one thing I wouldn't do, which is maybe the most obvious thing for him to do, is put Kai Havertz back in midfield.
Ooh. Who would you put, Adrian? Does Raheem Sterling get his first start?
I would give him his start, yeah. I would just play him, because I think that he's going to be so hungry to impress. And I think it would breathe positive energy into the Arsenal starting lineup at a moment where Arsenal fans are feeling a little bit glum and a little bit worried. I think if they see Sterling's name on the team sheet, it gives everybody a lift. So I would pick him based on that alone, in the hope that he delivers. I would go with Havertz up front. I would probably go with Trossard in the Odegaard role, with Partey and Jorginho together at the base. But there is a possibility that Ethan Nwaneri, who is 17 and a fantastic talent, he is effectively Odegaard's understudy. Now, if Arteta wants to stick to his tried and trusted 4-3-3, putting everybody in the same positions, the best fit would be Ethan Nwaneri. And that would be some story in its own right for him to play. And again, that would excite the Arsenal fans and maybe everybody associated with the Gunners ahead of kickoff. So, yeah, big calls, I think, for Arteta to make ahead of Sunday.
Okay. Are Spurs the ideal team for Arsenal to play, what with their high line and swashbuckling style?
I mean, we saw in this fixture last season, obviously Arsenal went 3-0 up pretty quickly, exploiting that space, and then Spurs made it nervous as the game progressed. I think
3-2 it finished.
Yeah, 3-2, and you could easily see a similar story in this match. I mean, Gary Neville's right. It is one of the best derbies. I mean, I think the only thing that's a bit sad about this one is the Premier League are making Arsenal wear their away kit, which is...
So they'll be wearing black, Duncan, because there's too much white.
Black v white,
yeah.
Which I get, for the people watching in black and white is ideal. But I do think that on historic...
We'll all be watching in black and white.
Well, yeah. For historic derbies, I think it should be... I mean, there's more a white on the Arsenal shirt this year, but not loads.
It's the first time in 38 years that they've worn an away kit in this fixture.
It's a real shame, and obviously it will be the same in the reverse, won't it? So, which just seems a bit daft. It's red v white. It's got to be red v white.
The game's gone. It's officially gone.
Spurs have injury concerns of their own. Dominic Solanke, maybe Mickey van der Ven out. Looking at the numbers, Spurs have created a huge amount this season. Finishing, though, has been a bit of an issue still. Yeah,
I mean, they obviously brought Solanke in to score goals, and he played against Leicester, didn't score, could have scored, and then got injured. To Rory's point a few minutes ago, I think there are a few Spurs fans now who are starting to lose the faith a little bit with Postecoglou. Yeah, I know a few, and a home defeat to Arsenal is not going to help on that front. So it's actually a really important game for Tottenham.
Yeah, and a depleted Arsenal as well, because a lot of Spurs fans will look at this and see it as a match that maybe they're not favourites to win, but they probably shouldn't lose, really. So that adds a pressure of its own, doesn't it, to Tottenham? I think they've played all right, but so far this season they've dominated games, but the opponents haven't been the strongest, have they?
Yeah, and it's, people start their thoughts, some people start their thoughts from August, but some fans think back to the end of, they ended last season pretty poorly, and it feels like some of the things that were an issue then have continued into this campaign.
So. I think with Spurs particularly, that's a valid way to look at it, isn't it? Because they've had various managers sacked relatively early in the season because there's been a real tail off the previous season. And it does... I'm not quite sure what Spurs want from a manager at the moment, but Postecoglou gave them kind of thrilling football, a slightly disappointing but basically standard finish last season. It feels like he's done okay, and he warrants kind of more time and more patience than that. But Spurs have proven willing to make changes in the past when maybe other people look at it and think you shouldn't make a change then. So Postecoglou probably does need, at least to avoid defeat in this, because if they lose to Arsenal, as Adrian says, depleted Arsenal, it tends to curdle things, doesn't it?
If they win, though, what a boost that would be for Postecoglou and for Arsenal's title rivals. Adrian, anything else you want to say about this game, or should we chat about what Man City and Liverpool are going to be doing this weekend?
Yeah, let's move on.
All right, then. Adrian, of course, will also be featuring the Handbrake Off, talking about the North London derby. You're going to be recording that straight after this show.
Yeah, going triple pod this morning. Boom. It's all happening.
So, Man City this weekend at 3 o'clock on Saturday will be hosting Brentford, while Liverpool simultaneously have Nottingham Forest. Man City Brentford, as I mentioned, the last team to beat Man City at the Etihad 22 months ago were Brentford. That was with an Ivan Toney brace. When we look at the odds of it happening again, I don't need to point out Ivan Toney won't be involved this time around. Anyone got any hopes for Brentford?
The front two are looking sharp, aren't they? And Burmo and Vissa. And I think that to stand any chance against City, you've got to carry a threat at the other end of the pitch on the counter-attack. And these two definitely do. They'll probably be part of a front three. I mean, I don't think it will leave the two up front at the Etihad Stadium, but yeah, I think that they can give the Bees hope. But I mean, Flecken is the busiest keeper in the Premier League this season, isn't he? I mean, they have conceded a lot of chances, which doesn't bode well when you've got to take on Haaland in this form. And I worked on that game at West Ham, and he was just frighteningly good, Erling Haaland. So yeah, they're overwhelming favourites for a reason.
7 goals after only 3 games of this Premier League season. If he gets a brace in this match, he'll set a new outright record for most goals after 4 games. Who's got 9 goals after 4 games then? Or 8, rather. That would be a new record.
It's often Mickey Quinn, weirdly, with these records. Okay. I mean, if he gets a hat-trick, it'll be only the 5th player in top-flight history in England to get 3 in a row.
Wayne Rooney, by the way, was the answer.
The millennial Mickey Quinn.
Right,
some people say, yeah.
Rory nodding his head to that Wayne Rooney news. Not sure if you're still answering in Albanian, in which case that surprised you.
No, I was nodding my head at the fact that quite often the answer to kind of esoteric Premier League statistical questions is Mickey Quinn.
There you go.
Because he seemed to spend that... Is it just the first season, Duncan, that he just seemed to set lots of records in that first Premier League season?
First 2, I think, yeah. He had a good start to the first 2, which is, sustained him historically.
They all count, just as they were early on.
Yeah. But yeah, no one scored a hat-trick for 3 games in a row in English top flight since Jack Bulmer in 1946.
Really?
So, and then all the others, obviously Dixie Dean did it, and yeah, it's an indictment of the offside change in the 1920s because it happened quite a lot then.
I did a piece on Haaland after that last performance for the Premier League, and I sort of looked ahead at Shearer's record and how doable that might be. He'd have to stay fit until his early 30s, really, primarily stay fit for, I don't know, at least 30 of 38 games a season and continue at his current rate, which might not be sustainable as he gets a little bit older. He would still be 31 by the time he got even close to Alan Shearer's record.
Good Lord.
So, as extraordinary as he is, the strike rate is just phenomenal. It's a strike rate that we've never seen before. He's still got to do this for a long, long time at City.
If we've never seen the strike rate before, and he would have to go that long to get closer, what's the difference between his career and Shearer's career? The fact that Shearer started in the Premier League?
No, Shearer started in Division 1, but he just started the Premier League so well. Had an injury as well, but I think he scored his first 100 goals in 124 games, which gets overlooked a little bit. I mean, he slowed down later on, but he kind of did reinvent himself and keep plugging away well into his 30s.
The astonishing thing with Shearer is that he had 3 major injuries, didn't he? He actually missed quite a lot of football, and for him to have set that bar so high that even for someone who's scoring at the rate of Haaland, it's not unrealistic, is it? I mean, I suppose the big thing is, does Haaland stay in England for long enough to break it? That would be the other one. I'm not quite sure who could afford to pay him outside of England, but the fact that it would be difficult even for Haaland, who seems to score a hat-trick every weekend, suggests that maybe we need to reevaluate just how good Shearer's record is to an extent.
There you go. Man City, anyway, strong favourites for that home clash with Brentford. Liverpool, meanwhile, at home to Nottingham Forest, are off to an absolutely flying start with their new manager, Arne Slot. 3 wins out of 3. Haven't conceded a single goal yet. No manager has ever begun their Premier League career with 4 clean sheets. Can Arne be the first, do you think?
Chris Wood's in good form.
Yeah?
So maybe. This has been a bad start for Liverpool. Been a really bad start for Liverpool. It was a good start until Old Trafford. And then they went and won at Old Trafford. And now it's going to make it much harder for everyone to remember that it's a transitional year, that they do have a new manager, that they've got question marks over certain players in the squad. They could do with a dispiriting draw, I would say, Liverpool. It's in their interest long term.
Federico Chiesa eligible to make his Liverpool debut in this game, although he's unlikely to displace Mo Salah from the side, you feel, given the Egyptians' forms. 3 goals and 3 assists in 3 matches so far. Forest, with Chris Wood, actually unbeaten so far this season, and they've actually had more shots this season than Liverpool have, so this could be an entertaining affair as well.
Yeah, and although weirdly they've not won at Anfield since 1969, which I know that sometimes that sort of record is a bit nonsensical, but it is quite surprising, that one, given Forest's strength in the 70s and 80s. Even then, they couldn't get anything at Anfield. So if that team couldn't, you imagine maybe this one might.
Yeah. I like the centre-halves. I think that they got potential. Murillo is a really good young player that they kept hold of. I thought he might be sort of tapped up by some bigger clubs this summer. And then Milenkovic, who they brought in, the Serbian guy, I think he's really good. So I think they got the makings of quite a strong partnership there. You've got the wingers. Obviously, they kept Delanga in the end, Hudson-Odoi, Gibbs-White in the hole. They will carry a threat at Anfield, definitely. They've got the players that can hurt Liverpool in the wide areas, because Liverpool are going to have all of the ball. They're going to spend it in the final third. I can see Forest on the counter causing them a few problems in the game.
James Ward-Prowse eligible as well to make his Forest debut in this game. How do you see him impacting that Forest team?
Don't know, really. I mean, they kind of just have 2 sitting players, don't they? So they don't ask a lot of their central midfielders other than to keep it simple. Win the ball, give it to Gibbs-White, give it to the wingers. And I think Ward-Prowse can do that. And obviously he offers maybe a little bit more than them in terms of his set-piece deliveries. So, yeah, I would, he'll get games, but I don't think he'll walk into the team, not given their form in the early games.
I mean, a lot of people have spent this international break reminiscing nostalgically about footballers from the 2000s, and Ward-Prowse is kind of that figure. I think 15 years ago he'd be a brilliant Premier League player. Now he's kind of notable for his set-piece delivery. If you had special teams in the Premier League and you could bring him on for for free kicks and Olympic corners, then yeah, fair. But I just don't think he's quite good enough as a midfielder and open play to get in the Forest team at the moment.
Wow. Pin that on the dressing room wall, Nuno, and see where it gets you. Very nice. Okay, well, that's what's happening with Arsenal and Spurs and Liverpool and Man City. Next up, let's check in on events this week in West London. Yeah, Bournemouth-Chelsea is the late game Saturday, 8 o'clock. Comes at the end of a week that's seen many reeling from revelations at Stamford Bridge about a major split between the Chelsea backers and the news that Todd Boehly might actually have been the sensible one all along. The Athletic's Liam Twomey joins us now. Liam, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, pleasure to be back.
Excellent. What has sparked this week's revelations?
Well, I think the relationship between Todd Boehly and Behdad Eghbali had been the subject of rumblings, shall we say, for quite a long time. But the thing that really changed the dynamic happened about a month ago, which was a meeting between the two men at which they agreed to explore potential buyout options in recognition that the relationship between Boehly and Clearlake, the majority shareholder of Chelsea, had broken down. And Bloomberg were the first to report that, all credit to them. And I think that coming out into the open prompted the principal parties and people around them to start being a bit more forthcoming about how that relationship got to this point, what the current state of play is at the top of Chelsea and where it could go from here.
Well, what do you think about where it could go from here? Is this sustainable? What's going to be the impact on the club?
Well, I think the short-term impact is more instability, which is basically all that Chelsea have known since Roman Abramovich put the club up for sale more than 2 years ago. The status quo is possible, a continuation of that, because Clearlake do not have the power to force Boehly and his co-investors to sell, and Boehly does not have the power to make Clearlake walk away. They're both setting out their respective stalls publicly that we're not going to leave, we're going to buy you out, and we're going to take full control. We don't know whether either side is bluffing at this point in time, so we don't know who is going to come out on top. But the current situation, the current ownership dynamic does feel untenable now that all of this is out there, now that so much information with increasing levels of animosity, you would have to say, has been flying back and forth over the last week or so. It's really difficult to see how Boehly and Eghbali in particular can get into the same boardroom and make productive decisions for the good of Chelsea, because that relationship just seems completely broken.
Liam, what was the relationship prior to the takeover? You know, were they strangers or had they worked together previously? And as a secondary point, who's the driver of this recruitment policy of bringing in the younger players on 9-year deals? Who's the facilitator of that?
Boehly and Eghbali and Jose Feliciano, the other co-founder of Clearlake Capital, they all knew each other. I think they had a good business relationship from doing deals together in their various sectors. But as we understand it, they'd never operated a business together. And that's very, very different. They had a level of familiarity and I think a level of professional respect, but it's very, very different when you're in the same boat trying to move in the same direction. And I think there maybe wasn't, because of the speed of the Chelsea sale process, there wasn't the level of due diligence into each other and the way they like to operate that there might otherwise have been in a normal takeover situation. They just had to get a consortium together and get over the line and beat the other bid teams that were vying for Chelsea. So I think what you've seen over the last 2 years is a steady recognition from the Boehly side and from the Clearlake side that they have very different ways of working. And I think this comes on to the second point about recruitment, because I think in the big picture, I don't think there's a massive disagreement. You know, I think that this idea of investing heavily in youth, some of the best young talent in the world, the long-term contracts, I think everyone in the ownership is kind of on board with that, both as a PSR measure, but also this view of asset protection I know people on the outside, you can have different views about how well that's working for Chelsea, but I think in terms of the big picture of Chelsea's recruitment, there isn't necessarily a ton of disagreement. But when you look at the particulars and Bowley taking a step back after that first window as interim sporting director, I think he expected, with this sporting leadership team in place with Lawrence Stewart and Paul Winstanley, that the specialists could then get on with the job. And what we've seen since is that Bedadig Bali has not really taken a step back. He's remained very hands-on. He works very closely with both the sporting directors. He was particularly active in that January window in a public way, flying to Turkey to help seal the Mudryk deal, leading negotiations with Winstanley for Enzo Fernandez right up to deadline day. And he is very hands-on, and if you ask people on the Bowley side, they would say he's micromanaging. Now, people on the Clear Lake side strenuously disagree with that and say that he's using his financial expertise to support the sporting directors. But so I think it's more in the execution of Chelsea's recruitment and the cultural clash in the way that Chelsea's operating, where the two sides of the ownership disagree, rather than the big picture of what Chelsea are doing.
All right, what about Pochettino? Who binned him? Liam?
Well, we had a lot of conversations around this, and I think it's broadly agreed. I mean, they don't agree on much, but it's broadly agreed that Pochettino's departure was a big factor in the final fracturing of this ownership. And Bowley was out there publicly in the week before this end of season review from Winstanley and Stewart, saying, Chelsea are going in the right direction. It's all coming together, talking about the need for stability in the front office, but also in the coaching staff. So he basically said all he could publicly to advocate for Chelsea keeping Pochettino. And the information we've received since has chimed with that he wanted Pochettino to stay, though he didn't ultimately formally veto the decision to move on from him. The Clear Lake side insists that it was Stewart and Winstanley conducting this end of season review, recommending essentially that it would be best for the club to change, and Eghbali and Clear Lake supporting them in that. But there is a belief on the Bowley side that Eghbali was the driver of that decision. So as you can see, lots of the facts here are contested.
Can hear more from Liam on that story, of course, on the Straight Out of Cobham podcast. There's a new one out today. Is that not right, Liam?
There is, yeah. We've had a lot of our listeners asking why we haven't put one up already. So.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Well, you've been busy with us here. Thank you so much for taking time out to do that. And speak to you soon. Thanks, Liam Twomey.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure.
Chelsea in a bit of a state of flux.
Is that state of flux not constant?
I suppose it is. So
in many ways should be familiar.
Constant flux. Yeah. The L is optional there, isn't it? Yeah.
It is a really weird situation, and that's the thing that's been going through my head as this story's kind of been unspooling is, and it's a very kind of journalistic thing to say, but they are £2.5 billion into this investment, plus whatever they spent on players, plus whatever they've committed to all these 9-year contracts. And I know that Chelsea say they've lowered their average wage to 60,000 from 200,000 and a week, and they're protected as the assets have long contracts. I think anyone with any sort of passing knowledge of football knows that a long contract can be a shield, but it can also be.
They literally employed
an
Winston
anchor.
Bogart at one point. So
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's nuts that no one at any point said, "Let me tell you about this Dutch defender," and we remember him around. He's probably still under contract, Winston Bogart, and there's a kind of football logic that they clearly on both sides, Clear Lake and Bowley, kind of think they can disrupt with that very like LA, Silicon Valley, kind of everything that's an old way must be wrong. That I think is the abiding presumption they came into Chelsea with, that you lot are stupid and we are the smart Americans. And there's a lot of American owners who've come into football like that, and they've learned pretty quickly that there are things that football does that are stupid, and there are things that football does that have been established over the course of like a century and a half as being the best practice in this really weird industry. I haven't seen anything or heard anything, like I say, of why you'd be prepared to kind of jack in that $2.5 billion commitment plus whatever else. You wonder to an extent whether it's more about Bowley kind of wanted to be front and centre, and Ed Barley clearly quite likes being the centre of attention. And I can't remember which deal it was that, I think it was Fernandez, that Ed Barley kind of was the one who wouldn't let it stop, who wouldn't let it go, who was determined to get it over the line. It's quite unusual for owners of football teams to want that much credit.
Right. I like your voiceover voice there. Rory. More of that, please. Bournemouth, anyway, will be the host for Chelsea this Saturday. Could see a debut for Jadon Sancho. Not sure who's place in the team he would take, as Madueke's been looking.
He's not getting in for Madueke at the moment, mate. He's very much in form. I think there's an opportunity on the left for him.
Right.
Jadon Sancho. Obviously, Pedro Neto will be the sort of stiffer competition there. You got Mudryk as well. I'd put him ahead of Mudryk, but I think there's a real player in Sancho. I still do. You just look at the form that he produced in the Champions League. With some of that mesmeric dribbling. I think he just needs to feel part of something. Whether Chelsea will make him feel part of it or not remains to be seen, of course. It'll be a test for Maresca's man management. I think if he does put the arm around the shoulder of Sancho and give him a chance, he could help revive his career. We'll see.
All right. That's Chelsea. Bournemouth obviously coming off that remarkable comeback win against Everton. Look forward to seeing what they do against the Blues. Meanwhile, the other joint-owned sleeping giants of the English game who are also coming off a wildly disappointing season are Manchester United Football Club, and they, coincidentally, are also down on the South Coast on Saturday. That's the early game when they visit St Mary's to take on Southampton. Manuel Ugarte could be making his debut in this game. Who's a fan? Duncan, are you a fan of Manuel Ugarte?
Yeah, he's good. But I'm not sure whether he will be making his debut. I mean, when they signed him, they said he, had some fitness issues and it would take a while.
But Casemiro.
Yeah, I could see Casemiro getting another chance.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, they're playing Southampton.
Yes, Southampton yet to take a point.
Yes, and Southampton have made more passes than anyone else, but in quite a lot of dangerous positions. And I think Aaron Ramsdale realised on his debut that he's going to be quite a busy man this season. United should win this. If they don't, then I think we're back into full-on crisis mode.
Good Lord. If they didn't win this game.
Yeah.
They haven't lost at St Mary's since August 2003. They had a 9-0 victory there a couple of years ago.
That was at Old Trafford.
Oh, that was at Old Trafford. Okay, but anyway.
I mean, even in the last time United won the league, which is going back a bit now, but Van Persie got a hat-trick, came from behind in this game to win. So it's one of those fixtures that everyone remembers the two defeats in the 90s, including the grey shirts one, and it kind of, that's all you need. It's like Liverpool 4, Newcastle 3. You just need a couple of things to lodge in people's heads. They're like, United always struggle at Southampton, but actually they don't.
And they're really good against promoted teams. They've lost 1 of 30. And they've won 15.
Really?
Yeah, 1 of 30 against newly promoted sides. They've won 15 in the last 17. So this is the type of match that, whether you're Manchester United are in shocking form or in a rare patch of decent form, they tend to get the job done against teams like this. So yeah, I think they have to win. If they don't win this game, then Ten Hag is going to face a lot of stick.
I agree with all of that, but I would say that there is absolutely no statistical evidence for this, but is there not like a bit of a premium on being the first of the really big teams to go to a newly promoted side early in the season? The traditional giants. I always think that's quite a tough ask, because St Mary's will be up for it because it's Manchester United at home. It's kind of first great fixture of we're back in the Premier League. You only encounter Manchester United in the Premier League. And I think that does make it more of a banana skin than it kind of looks for Ten Hag.
I would agree. I would agree on that. But that last home game, Nottingham Forest wiped the floor with them, completely dominated them. So you think if Forest can do it, surely United will do so. But
Adrian, I don't want to shock you, but Nottingham Forest are above Manchester United in the Premier League table.
Yeah, come the end of the season, they won't be. But yeah, I know what you mean.
All right. I'm looking forward to that. 12:30 Saturday. Lots of other games to look at. We'll check on those in the final part of today's Totally Football Show after this. Hey, you know what? Today is 12th of September, which is the 50th anniversary of Leeds sacking Brian Clough after 44 days in charge. 44 days, which began with him walking into the dressing room and telling the Leeds players, the first thing you can do for me is throw your medals in the bin because you've never won anything fairly. You've done it by cheating. Amazingly, it didn't end well. 12th September is also the 35-year anniversary, a little bit more niche this, of Crystal Palace losing 9-0 to Liverpool at Anfield. Duncan.
Yeah, I remember this because I remember getting up the next day, getting ready for school, and my mum telling me that Liverpool won 9-0, and I refused to believe her until I'd come down and put, I guess, CFAX.
CFAX.
Yeah, and there it was, yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't respond to that by immediately saying, well, that's only the 7th time a team has won 9-0 in the top flight.
Palace would have their revenge later that season by winning a classic FA Cup semi-final against Liverpool. This weekend in the Premier League, Brighton play Ipswich. It's the first ever Premier League meeting between these two clubs. In fact, the last time that Ipswich made the trip to Brighton for a top-flight fixture was August 1982. What was number one, listener? What was number one? August 1982. Bit of a classic.
UB40.
Interesting from Adrian. Kate Bush, says Rory. Duncan. Bit of a classic.
Elton John.
I'm sorry, Elton John, did you say? No, it's a track that I think perhaps more than any song of the 80s you'll hear still. It was Dexys with Come On Eileen. And the very next day, I mean, what a rich time. What a time to be alive and buying your records in Woolworths. The very next day, what became number one? Another 80s standout movie soundtrack classic. Rory? Rising Up?
How many times would you do this game?
It's the best bit.
Kate Bush.
Did my time, took my chances.
Oh.
Yes.
You're the Best by Joe Esposito.
No, but it's similar, isn't it? Rising Up.
Survivor.
Yeah, Survivor.
Yeah, Survivor.
Eye of the Tiger. Eye of the Tiger.
What a week.
Not sure. Sorry, what's that?
What a week.
Yeah, incredible.
use that.
But you know, every week was like that back in
What a
the
brat
80s. Look it up.
The Tannoy at the Goldstone ground must have been popping off.
Indeed. So, intriguingingly, the two managers in this Brighton Ipswich fixture possibly weren't even born then, were they? In 1982?
Nope.
Were they born in 92?
Definitely not. No.
How do we get here? Kieran McKenna, of course, and Fabian Hutzelaar.
Yeah, I worked on the Arsenal Brighton game, and it was brought up. I think it was during the commentary that I was old enough to be Fabian Hutzelaar's dad.
What?
Yeah, which it completely threw me off my game.
What?
Because it's like it can't be true.
This was in commentary.
Yeah, and or just before the game, and it just completely threw me. But it kind of
What is
is.
the difference between you and Fabian Hutzelaar?
Well, I'm in my 50th year. So
Are you?
yeah, I am.
Congratulations, Adrian.
Yeah.
But he's, what age is he? 33?
31.
31.
31. Oh, so yeah, very much so.
It's plausible if I'd have been, lively as a youngster,
Wow.
which I absolutely wasn't.
These footballers.
Okay.
Wenger was raging at Clarke's antics.
They called me the Reverend for a reason. Yeah, I was very boring.
Wow. Do you want to talk more about Brighton Ipswich? Ipswich, who've applied more pressures, producer Charlie tells me, than any other side in the Premier League so far this season. 689, which does sound like a lot.
You will never sing that. The thing about Hutzelaar that I think is really interesting is that obviously he'd done well at St. Pauli and got them promoted. And I think over the last 10, 12 years, England's got kind of better at accepting outside of the box ideas. Like, we're not quite as resistant to change or new things within a football context as we would have been previously. And so when Brighton brought him in, there was an element of, to replace De Zerbi, there was an element of, okay, well, look, Brighton tend to take risks. We know that it works with Brighton. You can kind of trust their judgment. But also we are conditioned to think, okay, this random German man who's offensively young for a manager, who could be Adrian Clarke's love child, they we're not naturally predisposed to think that will be a failure. I think if that had happened in 2007, everyone would have been like, well, this is a joke, this won't work, and he'd have been hounded out within a week. But even
a year or two ago, he still would have been, does he know our league?
Well, do you remember when Pochettino replaced Nigel Adkins?
Yeah, exactly.
And it was seen as a crime against humanity, and that Adkins had taken them up and De
Zerbi was the same story, when De Zerbi, who's got a track record, came in.
Yeah,
just very much.
there was. I think De Zerbi was less than Pochettino. And that's partly to the context of Brighton, but it's also because of the way we have matured as a football nation. But Herzl has still needed a really good start, because if he'd have lost 2 of his first 3, there would have been Brighton have spent a lot of money this summer. If he'd lost 2 of his first 3, the tone would have been, both amongst like the commentariat and maybe fans as well, this is a step too far. Like, you can't have a 31-year-old manager. Who would think you can have a 31-year-old manager? Yeah. But as it is, he's won 2, drawn 1, and that one was at Arsenal. And then this is another winnable game. It's a newly promoted side. Brighton look really good, and it's interesting how much those first few weeks do define how managers are seen, both by their fans and by the public at large.
Yeah, fair point, Rory, because there's been 1 or 2 other young German prodigy managers coming in, not with the greatest of results, but so far so good for Fabian. Aston Villa taking on Everton in the 5:30 game on Saturday. Everton on that 4-game losing streak going back to last season, and many people, given Villa's form, the Arsenal defeat notwithstanding, would see them losing a 5th in a row potentially here. I know you want to talk about John Duran and whether he might even oust Ollie Watkins from the starting lineup.
Well, I think for the first time ever, really, since Ollie Watkins became the undisputed number 1 striker at Villa, he is under real pressure. And I think if Duran hadn't been out in South America this week with Colombia, sort of playing in really hot conditions, I'm led to believe, I think it would almost be nailed on that Duran would start ahead of Watkins. His form has been incredible. In Premier League terms, and I know he's only scored 7 goals, so it's slightly skewed, but Erling Haaland is the only player to have scored goals at a faster rate than John Duran. Woo! Which is just mad, really. Goal every 96 minutes. This is because 35 of his 38 appearances have been as a sub.
Right.
So it's in short spells. He comes on, he scores, he makes an impact. And he's still only 20, so he can accept that role. But this kid is really good. Really good. Excellent left foot. Really strong muscular presence. More threatening in the air, certainly, than Watkins. And I think his movement is really improving as well. And that's the thing that separates Watkins from most other strikers, is like amazing movement and pace. And Duran is showing that he's got a little bit of that as well with that goal at West Ham. So, this kid could start. And I think Unai Emery has got a really difficult decision to make. Another little stat to chuck in. Since the start of last season, he's scored 7 goals from 10 shots on target.
What?
So when he hits the target, he beats goalkeepers. He's not giving keepers much of a chance. So I'm impressed with him.
That header he scored at Leicester.
Oh, I loved it. But I loved the bump. He sort of just knocked into Wout Fash, didn't he? And he sort of said, have some of that, create a little bit of space. It was a brilliant header. Loved
Magnificent.
it. Yeah. Good
I
player.
used to love Johnny Morris when he did Animal Magic. Do you remember that at all? Anyone? He would do voiceovers for animals. It was grand. And just when you're voicing their... I love when the ex-pros they voice the thought patterns of players. Love that. Have a bit of that. And then magnificent. I'd have an audio channel just for that.
Oh, nice.
It's
good to know.
A bit like, say, in Manhattan, where you got the subtitles for the... I'd have that, but a voiced thought processes of Premier League players. I will run. I won't bother running. All those things. Great. Sorry. Also in rich goal scoring form at the moment is Amadou Onana, for whom this will be a special fixture, given that it's against his former side. He's got 2 in 3 for Villa. What else this weekend? Well, 3:00 on Saturday, Fulham take on West Ham. Good Lord, the Costas beat West Ham home and away last season with an aggregate score of 7-0. Also, there's Wolves-Newcastle and Crystal Palace taking on Leicester.
Is Wolves-Newcastle one of those games, as Duncan alluded to earlier, that there have been a few relatively recent classics? So is that why it's on TV? Have they thought that could be a kind of...
I think it's a quota filling.
You think it might be a quota filling?
It's very... Yeah, we're heading into the quota month. September, October, November are... Whoa, that's on
Tick
Super Sunday. Yeah.
Well, this is the most drawn fixture, is it not?
11
Duncan.
of 18, yeah.
11 of 18. Right. It's also a fixture which sees 2 of the only 3 English managers in the Premier League this season go head-to-head. And if that doesn't get you watching, I don't know what will. There you go. That's Wolves-Newcastle. It is on at 4:30 on Sunday, straight after the North London derby. Anything we should know about Palace, Leicester and Fulham, West Ham before we wrap this up?
Yeah, Palace like playing Leicester. They've never beaten any team more often in the Premier League than they have Leicester. It's the Jordan Ayew derby, of course. He's just moved from Selhurst Park to the King Power, so it'd be interesting to see him come up against his former teammates. And I think there'd just be this feels like a big game for Palace and for Oliver Glasner. Obviously, they went into the summer really bullish about the progress they've made at the end of last season. It hasn't gone to plan so far, and it just feels like they have to get their season started here with a win against Leicester. And I think there'll be a little bit of excitement around the ground. You've got Eddie Nketiah maybe making his debut. Lacroix, the centre-back. You've got Shalabar as well there. So it could be a few new faces. And I'd expect, if they score the first goal here, Crystal Palace, I think they'll go on and win the game and start to look, climbing the table.
Magnificent. Lovely stuff, Adrian.
Oh, thanks.
So you're off to do Handbrake Off.
Handbrake Off time, yeah.
Handbrake Off. I look forward to hearing that. Thanks for being with us today. Duncan, many thanks to you for being in. And Rory, lovely to see you again. Listener, appreciate your involvement, without which, we would have been tree falling in a forest territory, wouldn't we? And nobody wants that. Many thanks to producer Charlie and get well soon to video producer Liam. And that's it for us. We'll be back late Sunday evening. So do join us then. For now, from all of us here, goodbye. The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.